Reverend Wendy continues her series From Struggle to Well-Being. This series is based on the book What's in the Way is the Way by Mary O'Malley. This week, Reverend Wendy talks about a state beyond the struggle and talks about how to discover how to use your mind as the tool it is, rather than letting it be in charge. Reverend Wendy also talks about the 5 qualities that are the essence of your true being.
If you were here with us last Sunday, then you know that we are in a short exploration of a book written by Mary O'Malley. The title of the book is What's in the Way is the Way, and it seems to have struck a chord with quite a lot of you. I understand that all the books that we did have disappeared last Sunday. I don't know if there are more up there, but you know how to get books if you need them. So we're continuing to take a look at this idea that what's in the way is actually the way, and in particular, this morning we're going to look at the idea of moving beyond struggle into the joy of living. Does that sound of interest to anybody? Moving beyond, so you can clap for that, moving beyond struggle into the joy of living. So we explored a couple of very general terms and ideas that she uses throughout her teaching in this book. And one is that there is this meadow, if you will, that describes an internal state of peace that is always present with us. She uses the word meadow to refer to that centered place, that place of peace, that place of calm, that place of stillness, that is who and what we really are, despite the fact that sometimes, in fact, oftentimes, we don't go there. We don't experience it. And the reason we don't experience it is because of this other phenomenon that she calls the cloudbank. And she likens it to thick fog, that when fog comes in and covers a familiar path, we cease seeing that path with the same ease and clarity that we would if the fog wasn't there, but the path is still there no matter how dense the fog is. And then she describes the phenomenon of what we know to be true as well, that it is the storyteller within us that is creating this cloud bank that's keeping us from seeing clearly the meadow or experiencing the meadow. There are a couple of things I'd like to have you keep in mind as I talk to you this morning, and in fact, one that I'd actually like to encourage you to practice this week. And it is the idea that we find ourselves living life tight and small when the cloud bank is thick. So I want you to remember the words tight and small. Tight and small. When we are listening to that storyteller telling us all the stuff that's wrong with the world, with life, how we are separate, how things won't work, how we'll remember that and remember this, that when we are living in this cloud bank, we will actually feel ourselves shrinking. We will be living our lives very tight and small. And the way that we begin to change that is that we unhook from it by choosing to actually use our minds consciously rather than letting our minds run the show. That's a really key point. We unhook or we disempower the storyteller by choosing to use our minds consciously and deliberately rather than letting them be on autopilot and kind of running the show. That's fundamental to our metaphysical way of living and life. And then she suggests, and I like the simplicity of it, that there are 5 essential qualities, 5 essential experiences that are true of us when we are in that meadow state. I'm going to tell you what they are, and then we're going to explore them more deeply. So they are flow, spaciousness, light, love, and stillness. I'll say it again. Flow, spaciousness, light, love, and stillness. Flow, spaciousness, light, love, and stillness. These are the essential aspects or essential qualities of our inner being. So we're going to look at the first one, flow. Flow. Everywhere we look, nature flows. Think about rivers flowing from the mountains, eventually to the sea. Think about the beauty of clouds flowing across the sky. Think about the wind flowing through the trees around the planets. Think about the flow of blood in your body. And think about what happens when flow is obstructed. A great deal of physical disease is a result of obstruction in the body. We all know we want that blood to flow freely in our veins, do we not? Think about how essential it is for rivers to be kept clear and clean and allowed to flow naturally for the well-being of the surrounding habitat, and consequently, as a result, also for our own well-being. So everywhere around us, we have evidence of the naturalness of flow. And it is also natural of our internal state as well. There is also an intelligence, a divine intelligence to this flow. There's a rhythm, there's a timing of it. Haven't you noticed in your own life that when you are in the flow of the movement of your life, it feels so much better than when you are resisting? Even when there are difficulties and challenges in your life, the resistance to them only makes the challenge that much harder to deal with. There is a way to deal with whatever is happening in our lives from the place of flow, from the place of fluidness. Mary O'Malley writes in the book, "The only thing in all of creation that doesn't flow is the cloudbank of the human ego. It is declared there is a me in here and there is a life out there. It believes itself to be separate from the flow of life and believes that its job is to control it. It lives from fixed positions, good, bad, right, wrong, liking, disliking. As long as you see yourself as separate, you will view life as a potential threat and will withdraw from the flow of life into the cloud bank of your mind." So the invitation then is to pay attention to the way we are living our lives and to ask ourselves, am I living from this place of flow? And if I am not, what is the story that I am telling myself in the moment that is keeping me, tight and small and constricted? When we know that health, whether it is health of the body physically or health of the spirit or health of the soul, is linked to this natural flow. Second essential quality or essence of our true being is this idea of spaciousness. Did you get a little bit of a sense of that just in the sweet John Denver song? The idea of spaciousness. It seems as if life loves space. Think about the universe. Do you ever watch any of those science shows where you learn about the vastness of the universe? I mean, it is mind-blowing. 24,000 trillion miles away is the nearest star. 24,000 trillion miles. I can't comprehend a number that big. Can you really comprehend it? That's a lot of zeros. And what to me is just as fascinating and just as challenging to wrap my limited human mind around is not only is there this incredible vastness on the macrocosmic level, but in a very similar way, there is incredible vastness and spaciousness on the microcosmic level. Let me read a piece here that describes it so that I get the numbers right, because they're mind-boggling. When we go in the other direction, not from the bigness of the universe, but the quantum level, we're made up of 70 to 100 trillion cells. You sitting right there, me standing right here. 70 to 100 trillion cells, and each of those cells, now get this, each of those cells is comprised of 100 trillion atoms. There's a lot of stuff going on in us right now. And if we were to blow up one of those atoms to be the size of a major league sports field, the nucleus of that atom would be a grain of sand in the middle of the field with the electrons dancing around. So, are you solid? In one sense, no. So, do you not find this mind-boggling? This looks solid. And on this dimension, I'm experiencing it as solid. But the suggestion is there's more than just what I'm experiencing that is going on. Harken back to one of the points that I shared with you in last week's lesson when we talked about a statement she makes in the book, that when we are experiencing struggle, one of the things that's important to us to remember is we are not the struggle itself. We are the space in which the struggle is happening. It's much like we are the space in which everything is happening in our life, and we are so much more than any single thing that ever has happened, ever is happening, or ever could happen. And that as we begin to clear the cloud bank a bit, as we begin to quiet the storyteller mind that is always naming and labeling and judging and comparing by appearances everything that's going on around us, as we begin to gently challenge and question that storyteller mind, we will begin to find that the cloud bank thins, and we feel more of this sense of spaciousness. And in the feeling of this sense of spaciousness, we feel the experience of faith and strength and joy, actually, to live our lives in a much more naturally empowered way. The third essence of our true being, she says, is light. That we are light. Just as we are vast and spacious, we are light. Scientists today are looking at light and looking at our universe in very different ways than they once did. David Bohm, who's considered the grandfather of quantum physics, has basically said everything is made up of light. Matter is just frozen light. Matter is just frozen light. Arne Wilder, in the book Planetary Mind, says almost all of the particles in the universe are those of light. Light is a vital ingredient in all atoms. And then we have Jesus. 2,000 years ago. Maybe he was the grandfather of quantum physics. He said, "You are the light of the world." Bohm saying, much of matter is frozen light. Jesus said, "You are the light of the world." If we really got that, if I really got that to the fullest and understood that to the fullest of myself, and if you really got that and understood it to the fullest of yourself, we would be living in a very fundamentally different world. We would be creating, out of mindfulness and out of consciousness, a very different world than we create when we create out of a sense of separation or a sense of fear or a sense of guilt. If we looked at one another from a place of light within us to the recognition of light within another, we would begin to interact with one another in very, very different ways as well. In some ways, it's similar to the Hindu greeting Namaste. The divine in me recognizes and sees the divine in you. Essentially, it's the same thing. The light in me is practicing recognizing and seeing the light in you when maybe it takes a little practice with some people. You know, there are some in our lives, is it not true, that it is so easy for us to see the light in them. And there are times that we can see it easily in ourselves. But I suspect that you have a few people in your life where you have to practice sometimes seeing that light and calling that light forward. But what a different world it is, and what a different way we interact with one another when we choose to live from that place. When we choose to live from that place. The light does not see color of skin. The light does not see age. The light does not see sexual orientation. The light does not see the biggest mistake you ever made. The light only sees you as light and invites you to let that light be bigger. The fourth essence of our true being, she says, is love. How could it be anything other than that, really? That the essence of our true being is love. You may be familiar with the story of Eben Alexander. He's a neurosurgeon, and he suffered spinal meningitis, and through that, he was in a coma for 7 days. Now, keep in mind, this is a neurosurgeon. And he had some experiences when he was in this coma that he attempted then to write about in the book called Proof of Heaven. And when he was asked what the core of what he experienced while he was out of the body, so to speak, and in this comatose state, this is what he said. Love is without a doubt the basis of everything. This is the reality of realities, the incomprehensibly glorious truth of truths that lives and breathes at the core of everything that exists or ever will exist. And no remotely accurate understanding of who and what we are can be achieved by anyone who does not know of and embody it in all their actions. No remotely accurate understanding of who we are and what we are can be achieved by anyone who does not know of and embody it in all their interactions. When Jesus was asked the greatest commandment, he didn't recite any of the thou shalt nots. He said the greatest commandment is to love God with all your mind, heart, and soul, and to love your neighbor as yourself. When he said of his disciples that they will know that you are my disciples, you are my students. He said they will know that you are that, not by how well you quote me, not by how many people you save, but by how well you love one another. Brian Swim, who is a physicist, refers to this idea of love also. Get that, a physicist. Referring to this idea of this attracting force of love. He doesn't use the word love. He actually uses a word that I think is better because it doesn't have all the baggage around it. You know, when we use love so indiscriminately to say, I love dark chocolate, or I love whatever, you know, it takes away our use of that word then when we're trying to use it precisely. Anyway, Brian Swim calls it allurement, and he writes, this force of attraction can be seen from the very beginning of our universe. This stuff that arose out of the Big Bang followed the call of attraction and came together into communities we call atoms. The next step happened when these atoms were drawn together into communities called molecules. Then molecules were so attracted to one another, they came together in communities called cells. And then cells followed the call of allurement and became multi-celled beings. There is this natural allurement, this natural desire to connect. And when we connect from love, we raise ourselves up. How many of you are familiar with Charles Darwin? And what do you think of when you think or you hear the name Charles Darwin? Okay, I'm hearing both things. Survival of the fittest, I heard, and evolution. He wrote the book, The Descent of Man, and And yes, he is known through his research and study and observation of animals in the Galapagos Islands, of this idea of evolution, which is a real thing, both on a physical level and on a level of consciousness. But unfortunately, what most people have grabbed onto in association with his work is this idea of competition, this idea that species primarily compete, hence the phrase, the survival of the fittest. But in his book, The Descent of Man, when he wrote about the relationship of species to one another, he only mentions survival of the fittest, which is about competition, right? Twice. He writes about love as it relates to species connecting with each other or their relationship 95 times. Does that not put a different spin on it? Just like we can either acquaint ourselves very wrongly with the God of the Old Testament, who, if God were like that, he should be locked up. Truly. Or we could try to acquaint ourselves with the God that Jesus tried to talk about. Abba, Father, close, transcendent, immanent, love. Very different, right? Very, very different. The great mystics all say the same thing. When an individual awakens spiritually, what they awaken to and what they see and what they know is love. That we are that. That we are that. And then finally, the essence of our true being, she says, is stillness and peace. Is stillness and peace. In the midst of our doingness, in the midst of our responsibilities, in a time that we find ourselves living today, I believe that the cultivation of stillness is essential. I do not believe that we will ever experience co-creating peace on earth if we do not individually practice cultivating that inner stillness. Why do I say that? Because it is from that place of inner stillness that you touch and can hear the voice, if you will, of God, of Spirit. And we need that voice guiding and directing our choices individually, but we also need it guiding and directing our choices as a human family and as a country. Mm-hmm. And so we do the work that we can do right where we are. We make sure that we are cultivating these essential experiences within us, that we are paying attention when we feel tight and small because we've been listening to the storyteller that is forever evaluating and judging and comparing. And we begin to allow that voice to fall silent so that that cloudbank begins to thin. And these natural states, the state of flow, the state of light, the state of spaciousness, the state of, what was the other one that I've just left out? How could I leave that one out? The state of love and the state of stillness can be what's in charge, if you will. It's out of that we're going to make the highest decisions for ourselves, for our families, and for our communities. I'm going to close with a quote from Father Thomas Keating, a Trappist monk, who said, "God's first language is silence. Everything else is a translation." Namaste.
Many people enjoy Reverend Wendy's talks and meditations and aren't able to attend the Unity Center in person. If you're part of our extended family from around the world and would like to help support the Unity Center, please go to our website or download our free app, which offers even more ways to connect with the Unity Center. Namaste.